Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. By virtue of its geographic location, Delta State retains what's arguably the third longest stretch of coastal territory next to the Atlantic Ocean, with Bayelsa and Rivers occupying the first two positions. This is said to give Delta State limitless windows of opportunity to continue to produce the natural resources that must be present for meaningful development to take place. However, beyond the brick-and-mortar interpretation of development, which is generally associated with governance across sub-national components of Nigeria, there have been questions raised at various times by those who say that Sheriff Oborowori's administration has, in its 2.5 years of existence, offered pretty little in terms of building capacity for human resource development. For an updated view on the issues raised, we are now being joined by Honorable Charles Aniagwu, a seasoned journalist, public relations professional, and currently the Delta State Commissioner for Works and Public Information. Good morning, and good to see you again, and welcome to the morning show.
Good morning, Adesoa, and good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Charles.
Honorable Aniagwu, let's head straight into it. What are the measurable ways that the Oborowori administration has been able to improve human capital development over the past 2 years in Delta State, especially considering the record FAC allocations that Delta State is getting from the federal government?
Thank you very much, Adesoa, for raising these issues. And you know, when you go into an examination, you have, first of all, the marking scheme for the lecturer or teacher, as the case may be, who is setting the questions, so that by the time you begin to assess the student, you now take a look at the marking scheme, so you know where to award certain marks. In the case of Right Honorable the Sheriff Oborowori, the governor of Delta State, he was very clear at the beginning. And when he came up with the MORE agenda, so the MORE agenda became the marking scheme. The MORE is about meaningful development, opportunities for all, realistic reforms, and of course, enhanced peace and security. In these 4 thematic areas, Oborowori has been able to deliver to the admiration of not only those in Delta, but across the length and breadth of this country, which is also why your medium and your sister organization, This Day Newspaper, recognize him as Governor of the Year in that regard. But coming to the questions you raised with respect to the possible challenges and how he's delivering, improving the capacity and the human capital development of our state is actually interwoven. When it comes to the aspect of meaningful development, it became necessary that we needed to expand the infrastructure and to be able to open up windows both into our rural communities and indeed across the length and breadth of the 25 local government areas, so that we can have some form of seamless interaction and individuals can commute, so that those who are engaged in some form of either subsistence of commercial agriculture can afford to evacuate their produce. And for them to do that, they needed the roads. We also realized that there is also need to boost the energy generation in terms of electricity, so that we can fire down a number of industries that require this energy to be able to produce. And then also we took a step in that direction by partnering with supply power with a view to seeing how we can inject as much as 120 megawatts, not only into the national grid, but for us to also benefit as a state. That is also ongoing, and it has reached an advanced stage. The many projects that Oborowori is working on, be it in the area of roads, bridges, or in the area of schools that were revamping, or in the area of hospitals that were given a new lease of life, or of course, the different other aspects of human capital development that are directed at our people through the Job Creation Office and a number of other platforms, is with a view to expanding not only our GDP, but the livelihood of our people in the positive direction. So I will be glad if we can take them from the part of specificity, in which case you become quite specific. These different projects and the budget we are putting in, like this year we have as much as a 1.7 trillion, with over 1.1 trillion of that amount going into the capital part of the budget. And you know that CAPEX has a way of reaching out to the people. All these funds that we are spending, beyond the fact that we are expanding infrastructure, goes into employing a number of people, both directly and remotely. In addition to the fact that in the civil service, a whole lot is also being done to encourage the civil servants, both by way of a prompt payment of salaries and a number of other initiatives that the Oborowori administration have put in place. We're also expanding our ability to be able to create jobs. Not long ago, I'm happy your medium also covered it when we had the groundbreaking of the Kwale Free Trade Zone, where a number of industries have come in. Those industries are not going to be working with flies. They are going to be working with human beings. And these are the human capital that we have available in Delta. You recall also not too long ago, Oborowori led us, our governor, to Brazil, where we also had a whole lot of interaction with some farmers, and a whole lot is also happening in that direction. We are fine-tuning the discussion, all with a view to creating jobs for our people. There are individuals who may want to think that we needed to continue in certain ways they are used to by just throwing money here and there, and that when you do it, it's assumed that you have been able to empower the people. There are others who may want to think that you can just, okay, the state government want to employ 6,000 persons, and then you open up the basket of employment without having to look at the vacancy that may exist, so that the individuals that are employed will now begin to add value. In the health sector, a whole lot of medical personnel have been employed, even as we are also training more, because we have realized that there's a whole lot of capital flight in that particular sector. So my sister Adesua, the Oborowori administration is not only engaged in bricks and mortar by way of the infrastructure that I mentioned earlier. It's also dealing with the software, which has to do with the human minds, and a whole lot is happening in that direction. Adesua and Steve.
All right, Charles, thanks so much. I mean, you're very adept at speaking eloquently about the great things happening in Delta State. And I want to commend, your administration. Your governor picked the Governor of the Year award for infrastructure at the Leadership. I believe that was the 18th edition last week at the Leadership Newspaper Awards. Congratulations to you. But then many people might also say that...
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, you're welcome. That there seems to be a huge emphasis on infrastructure, possibly, at the expense of a few other things. You have tried to defend the fact that it is not just about, brick and mortar, that there are a few other things that you are saying. The area that I want you to speak on is the area of the challenges that many towns and villages and communities in Delta State are facing, which is lack of electricity and not being connected to the national grid. As we speak, as you know, about 60% of Delta State. If Ojiope were to be here today, you know how she will have spared with you, concerning Kwale, concerning, Ndokwa area that are still struggling. You hinted of a certain amount that you are trying to generate as for the Sapele power. Speak more to what you are doing, what is delaying the result that people want to see, and why, given the fact that the president, has signed into law the 2025 Electricity Act Amendment Bill that allows states like your own, to generate and distribute power. What is delaying this power renaissance that people are expecting from the Oborowori administration?
Thank you very much, Steve. This is more than a multiple barrel question, but I'll take them bit by bit. You started by recognizing that our governor was recognized by Leadership newspaper. Of course, you know that the headquarters of Leadership newspaper is in the north. So, and that was just about 3 days ago. What that tells you is that even while Oborowori was very busy trying to transform the length and breadth of the 25 local government areas in Delta, we never knew that our brothers in the north were also taking a keen look or possible cognizance of what's happening in Delta. And they came to the realization that indeed this is a man that needed to be recognized. And we appreciate the editors and the management of Leadership for coming even from the far north to see what is happening in down south Delta. Then also, less than 24 hours after that, I also need to tell you, I just left Lagos yesterday. We're also in Lagos to pick up the overall Governor of the Year by the New Telegraph newspapers. I want to tell you, Steve, that there are a number of other organizations that have written to us, but as somebody who is at the center of helping to advise the governor as to when we'll be able to have time to pick up awards, there are a number of them that I have decided to advise that we turn down so that individuals may not begin to think that we are approaching these organizations to extend this recognition to our governor. I am happy that most of these organizations, including yours, have recognized the many beautiful things that is happening in Delta, and we appreciate God for giving us Oborowori at this time. That is with respect to the award. Now, coming to the issues of power you talked about, I am happy And maybe LG will, let me also ask that LG accept our own condolences over the demise of his wonderful father. And we do hope that as time progresses, all of us will get involved in helping to give the father a befitting transition to the great beyond, and beautifully so. Now, if LG were to be on stage today, LG will perhaps inform you that the extension we were bringing in from Abraka, you recall the last time I was with you in Lagos, I told you that the governor approved that we'll be able to get the power all the way from Abraka, and that is costing us close to 800 million naira that we're bringing the light all the way from Abraka to step it down in Kwale and all those, Musadigi and all those areas. Today, as we speak, that has been concluded. What is now being done is for them to be able to now feed them into the homes. The transformers are being energized. And if you can call anybody in Indo-Kwa Nation, they will tell you that we have done that. Even when you know before now that those are supposed to be individual responsibilities, individuals connecting lights to their homes. But we have been able to, as a government, because we realize that there is a need to also get those in the houses energized. We've been able to, as a government, be able to attract that. You also asked the issue of taking advantage of the federal government for the liberalization of the energy sector by way of tinkering, even if we did not engage in a constitutional amendment to deal with the issue of power, which is at the moment in the exclusive legislative list. But of course, by virtue of the intervention of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, states are now allowed to have a buy-in. Today, we're already in the process of establishing our Energy Commission to be able to supervise that process. We have been able to also bring in some form of captive power. I mentioned to you the last time that even in our capital territory, almost 100% of government establishments are being powered by captive power being generated in Asaba, about 8.5 megawatts of electricity, which is not, which is more or less off the grid. What we are doing with supply power that I mentioned earlier. Before now, the previous administration have had cost to acquire some turbines that were supposed to energize, but over time that was not done, and that was in Ogareki. But over time, the previous administration and the present administration saw the need to re-examine those turbines and what we needed to do, because there seemed to be some form of pilfering of some of the equipments, call it vandalization of those equipments. But the Borowori administration felt that for us to be able to have a proper advantage of those equipment that we have already acquired, running into several billions, that it will not be wise to sell it up as scrap. I was being advised by some persons. Thank God our development arm, our DIDA, was able to come on board, and then they advised that the best thing to do is to have some form of a relationship with supply power that is already doing very well, injecting as much as over 1,000 megawatts to the national grid. That since they have the competence and the capacity, and that they will be able to have access to gas and every other thing that is needed to be able to fire the turbines, that is important. We go into a relationship with supply power. And that is what we did, coming into some form of a lease to own, and that at the end of the day, we will have a partnership that will enable us to inject over 60, because we have two turbines. Each of them is going to do as much as 63 megawatts. But because of some form of energy loss along the line, we are saying that at the end of the day, it's going to be 120 megawatts. Just in the previous week, I and some of my colleagues in the economic team, we had the privilege of visiting supply power to see how far they have gone, because we needed them to move with some speed. And we are hopeful that in the next couple of months, that particular relationship would have yielded the maximum fruit. And coming back to what Adesuwa talked about earlier with respect to human capital empowerment, by the time you get to supply power and see the amount of data, the number of data that are involved in terms of fabrication of some of the parts that needed to be fabricated at home, with me when I mean at home, there and there in supply, that is being done with several staff being employed, datans being employed. Apart from the fact that they're earning money, there's also some form of technology transfer. There is one of their advisors, consultants, who is from Turkey, and sure, I teased him and said it's high time he also became a Nigerian by trying to naturalize, because to a very large extent, he has done a whole lot to help them in ensuring that we have value for that particular relationship. So that is being done. And we are doing it, finally, Steve, for the purpose of getting a number of industries to be energized. That is not all that we are doing. we're also taking steps to see how we can take advantage of the up-by power, which has been a subject of a certain level of controversy, so that it is seriously energized, and at the end of the day, we'll be able to also have some form of step down. I am very, very convinced with the amount of energy that is trapped in some places in Delta, that in the not too distant time, with what Oborowori is doing, we will not only be having energy, but we will be having more than enough for the operations of industries, whether small-scale industries or large-scale industries, and even homes as well. So be rest assured, Steve, that a whole lot is being done in that regard.
Thank you. Now, can we speak a little bit about health infrastructure in Delta State? I saw your budget for 2024. You had about 16 billion set aside for modern health infrastructure. However, only about 5 billion was released. I believe for last year, it was 24 billion that was originally budgeted. How far has Delta State come in terms of building modern health infrastructure? How is this money being utilized?
Thank you, Adesua. But before I do that, let me also respond to one of the questions that Steve also asked with respect to how we are trying to open up the local communities. In our 2026 budget, we first budgeted 3 billion for every local government for the purpose of expanding the road networks. And when you put that together with having 25 local governments in Delta and 33 billion each, that comes to 75 billion. But the governor felt that that was not enough, that there is a need for us to also have some form of intervention, either in the area of health, in the area of education, needs that are specific to different local governments. So he decided to also provide another 4 billion. So in which case, as I speak to you, every local government in Delta today has 7 billion dedicated to just that local government. And when you put 7 billion and you times it by the 25 local government area, you are talking about 175 billion dedicated to just issues in the local government. That is, of course, without prejudice to the many other projects that will run across the different local government. You recall I told you, Steve, the last time that we started in 2020 when we were preparing the 2024 budget by providing 1 billion each for each of the local government. And when the governor saw that the thing gave us a whole lot of results, whilst we were preparing the 2025 budget, he opted to 2.1 billion. And that also gave us additional result by making it possible for us to be able to have road networks in a number of these local governments. But this time around, the governor says, no, we are not only going to be expanding the road network in these rural communities, we need to also be able to take steps in certain other areas, be it health, be it education, be it some form of other human capital development that are more or less peculiar to those local communities. I can tell you there is no state in the Federation today that can boast of even 2 billion dedicated to local governments, but we have 7 billion dedicated to each of the local governments in Delta. And then that now brings me to the question that Adesua asked with respect to what we are doing in the health sector. From what I have just explained, you can see that it's not only the budgetary provision that you have mentioned is the only thing that we are now going to be having to spend in the health sector. So which means from the other 4 billion, in addition to the ones you have mentioned, the over 16 billion, we are now going to be having so much to be able to deal with issues in the health sector. We are not only interested in infrastructure in the health sector, which we are tackling across board, but we're also interested in also bringing about a human capital in that sector, because that is the one sector that has suffered across the length and breadth of this country on account of some form of human, I don't know, that is some form of medical tourism, or you may want to call it medical, how do I put it now? Individuals living, medical personnel having to leave this country in search of greener pastures. To be able to deal with that, the Oborowori government established a school that is dedicated solely to the training of medical personnel in a place called Ovrode, where we have now been able to establish School of Medical Sciences, and a whole lot is being done in that regard to be able to train nurses, to be able to train other medical personnel that are involved in that particular ecosystem. In addition to the fact that we now have hospitals that are also involved, higher institutions. By the way, Delta being the only state that has 4 state-owned universities, is also involved in training doctors and all those other very senior medical personnel to be able to expand activities in that sector and then provide the necessary leverage for our people. One other thing that we are doing that you may not be seeing in that budget at this one is the fact that today we are #1 in terms of contributory health insurance, where we're able to ensure that our people are able to have access to medical services without having to tear off their pocket. Today, with just 7,000 naira, any person who is registered and enrolled in that system can have access to medical services in our hospitals that are accredited. We have over 2 million persons already enrolled. It is only the federal government that can get close to that number. That is because Borowori believes that we need to be able to provide that particular health, because they say health is wealth. Now, coming straight to the issue you raised, as of last year, we began the process of expanding the renovation of our hospitals. Over 400 of our dispensaries were captured in that particular project. The Ministry of Health was able to bring them on board, and the governor directed that those that didn't have fences and good roofs, that for them to look good, that they needed to attend to them. As we are doing that, we're also establishing and building another tertiary hospital that is also going to serve, in addition to the 3 we already have. We have one in Asaba Specialist Hospital that is running very well. We have one in Ogara, which is, of course, the DELSU that is providing services and a training ground for doctors in different universities. And, of course, we have the Warri Central Hospital. So across the 3 senatorial districts, we have tertiary health medical institutions. The secondary medical institutions, by way of general hospitals and other cottage hospitals, are also being revamped, all with a view to ensuring that we have our people and places where they can obtain medical services. The Borowori administration, beyond what you have mentioned, have also proceeded to acquire a whole lot of modern technology in health services. Today, we have some of those equipment that you cannot easily find anywhere in a number of government hospitals, like diagnostic equipments that will be able to look at like the MRI machines, to be able to take a look at those things. Only most private hospitals that you have access to those. But today, the Borowori government have acquired quite a number to be able to provide those services. And not too long ago, we were able to commission these particular facilities.
Yeah. All right, Charles. We haven't got, a huge time left, but then I want to squeeze in 2 questions, just for you to clarify. One development, one politics. First will be to ask you, yes, you've spoken a lot, about development, about infrastructure. You are also in charge of rural roads. But then you're also in charge of public information. And therefore, people will be interested in knowing what is the soft power for Delta State that your administration is selling. Warri is very iconic. It's been iconic like forever. But then how much of that is your government pushing as a destination? When you mention Asaba, when you mention a few other cities in Delta State, Efrun, Agbo, Sapele, what is it in terms of soft power that the Delta State government is selling to draw attention to it? And then secondly will be politics, which is, not to draw you into politics, but for you to clear the air so that it doesn't become a distraction. We read in the media that the APC, I believe in your ward or in your local government, allegedly suspended you for anti-party activities. What is the real situation? Are you still a member of the party? Are you struggling to establish yourself or to defend yourself so that you are not distracted from the job for which you were hired by Governor Sheriff Borowori? What is the true situation?
Well, let me start from the last question. I am happy you raised it. I didn't want to comment on that particular issue because it's actually coming from some of my brothers who I believe were joking. I am still very much a member of the APC. If you read what they posted in the social media and of some of our media houses that obviously didn't look at the issue of professionalism, they just took it up. If you are writing a letter to somebody, number one, nobody petitioned. Number two, there was no complaint from any quarters. And that letter is saying you are suspending the person. And what is the issue? We are engaged in the issue of the primaries. So there are persons who are holding forth at the moment as caretaker committee members. They came and said they needed me as the leader of that ward to endorse them and bring them back. I said, no problem, you can come back, but come to the general leadership meeting. If the leadership believes that you people need to come back, it will be fine. But the leadership believed that because of the certain zoning, you know, this zoning you talked about, it also happens even at the level of the wards. And then they said that it is not going to be so, that we needed to respect the zoning arrangement that have always given us peace. And so along the line, they lost out. They were not able to come back. And what they wanted was the normal thing that people do where you gather, because, you know, they were more or less in opposition in Delta before. And so it was easy to just point people and then give them position. But today you have a ruling party, so you must follow a democratic process to be elected. So because they were not fortunate to come back into the ESCO by way of the consensus arrangement, they went ahead to begin to reap the constitution of the APC. If you go to Article 21 of the constitution of the APC, you will understand clearly. I'm happy the DSD and Arise, being very notable media houses, didn't join in that fray. And I didn't want to comment because it didn't mean anything to me. They were actually joking. And about Wednesday, when we'll be done with the Congress, they are no longer going to be members of the ESCO. My other leaders in the world wanted us to take action against them. I said, no, they are our brothers. If you don't beat a child and ask that child not to cry. So maybe they are crying because they are not coming back into the ESCO. So it's not a problem. I'm a member of the APC. If they want to follow the process, they should go and call a meeting, set up a committee, even write me, and then tell me these are the allegations against you. Of course, I can't get involved in that kind of so. To answer it for, I'm a member of the APC. It was actually just a joke, maybe in their own way, taken too far. But it didn't mean anything to me because they are my brothers and will always remain brothers, politics or no politics. Now, to the first issue you asked in this last question, you did talk about what we are selling that is going to make a Warri or other places to be tick. Today, Oborowori have redefined the skyline of Warri and environs. And why is it doing that? It's not for the purpose of just beautifying Warri and environs. It is because there was a need to give Warri a facelift, make it much more attractive. What Oborowori has done that you may not see physically is the issue of the security that we have today in Delta. You can see a number of investors coming into Delta. Not long ago, you saw Obi Kubana talking about the Kubana Millennium City. That is going to cost several billions. The reason why he's doing that, and he has made it clear, is because Asaba has provided a safe haven for a number of investors. There are many other investors that are coming into Delta. If you come to the Warri houses, you see a whole lot of them. And that is because that enabling environment is the number one thing that Oborowori is selling. That there is peace, there is safety in Delta. So if you come and put your money in Delta, you know that your money is going to give you return on investment without having to worry about the issue of insecurity. Not long ago, we launched the Security Trust Fund, all with a view to assisting the federal security agencies and at the same time empowering some of our local security networks to be able to provide that enabling environment. So that enabling environment is the number one thing that Oborowori is providing to attract people. So it's our unique selling proposition. Our second unique selling proposition is the management of the resources of data, which Oborowori is doing very distinctively and very excellently. Little wonder a number of these organizations have recognized the many things that's happening in data. So, Steve, my brother, I would advise that any of these days that you have time, maybe when you are free, I know you are very, very engaged. Just like I was able to leave Lagos yesterday and today I'm in Abuja, just take away 24 hours. We will host you. We'll give you a driver. I don't even need to lead them. Just point where you want to go to. Because I'm sure anywhere you go, the footprints of Oborowori's administration is not only present, but it's very, very loud. And so in any case, it's laying solid foundation and indeed leaving footprints in the sense of time.
Fantastic. Honorable Charles Aniagwu, we want to thank you for joining us on the morning show today. You've spoken well. Thank you indeed.